All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. I am not going to be looking at comments. Wish I could, but I can't. For some reason, can't handle trying to keep track of both of what I'm saying and going back and forth between the comments. I will periodically be checking in on the comments, just not all the time. So if you do want to ask a question or leave a comment, I'll try to switch over to the comments every once in a while. I forgot because just busy life happening yesterday that I didn't get, so I didn't get the weekly email out requesting images or reminding you that this was happening. But I hope enough of you remembered and made it over here to check it out. If you have any images that you'd like to submit to be critiqued in this broadcast, then send them right away, and then I'll have them and be able to have time to get them ready for critique next week. Today I'm going to do something. Uh, well, I haven't done too many of these, so this isn't necessarily probably different per se. But I'm going to, instead of critiquing somebody who is alive, I'm going to critique somebody who is not, and that is Degas. So Degas, those of you that have taken classes from me before know that I love Degas, and I think he was masterful in his exploration of how to create visual pathways, how to guide a viewer through an image, and how to communicate focal point, how to communicate story, how to just create engagement. And I think there are things to learn from him, both in terms of representational artwork, uh, but also I think the same lessons, even though his mode was representational, I think the same lessons could be applied to abstraction. Some of the things that he was working with. So I just consider him a master of visual language. And I think it's worth kind of teasing out perhaps some of the things that he was doing so successfully. So that is what I'm going to focus on today. Normally, these broadcasts, these critiques are, my intention is that they will be focused primarily on um, either works in progress or works that have been recently completed. As I've mentioned before, this is because I think there is value in, or momentum, energy, um, inspiration to be had from looking at work and knowing that the work is happening now. So hopefully, I would love to see what you're up to. Send in images. And if you're not on my email list to get the reminders or requests for images, you can get on the email list at dabbleon.com. That's DABBLEON.com. And with that, let me switch over here to Photoshop. And let's take a look at these two images. So there's this image. And actually, before I get started, I'm going to go over and looks like, hey, Irvin is there. Hey, Irvin. Good to have you. Thanks for saying good morning. Good morning. All right. Just wanted to check in, see if there were any questions or the like. Okay. So going back to Degas. This is the first image that we're going to be looking at, and then this is the second. So both images or paintings of ballet dancers, which is something that he was well known for. One horizontally formatted, and the other one vertical. So first, what I'd like to do in both images is just look at some of the ways that he is structuring his image, how he's structuring his composition to communicate clearly what it is that we're supposed to be getting from this, right? I wanted to look at this one first. If I can, there it is. So first, there is something that's kind of hard to get at, I think, in teaching and in creating. Um, is to be able to see the underlying structure, the foundation that that an image is built on. It's hard to see that. It's hard to teach that. Well, it's not so hard to teach, perhaps, but hard to teach in a way that it's that we can put it into practice. So here, one thing that I just wanted to simply point out here is that he's got a very simple and compelling foundation that he's building on. So what I mean by that is we have our primary subject matter, this ballet dancer. And we have some secondary subjects back here in the distance. There's a guy standing there, looks like, and maybe either it looks like we have some feet, so a grouping of dancers. But really it's, I think it's primarily just this dancer and then this person that's back here behind the scenes. Those are our kind of primary subjects of this image. So if we were to take those two out, and I guess this dancer right here is also visible right next to the guy that's standing right behind the scenes. So if we took those subjects out of the equation and just looked at what was in the negative space, or the space around our primary subject matter, it could be reduced into some pretty simple shapes. So we've got this shape, if I were to kind of lump it all together, this shape right here, and then this shape up here, this kind of curtain or blue or whatever that is, and then we have the ground. Again, this is if we were to disregard or take out our primary subject matter. So we have this foreground, kind of a midground, and then a background. Now, look very simply at the relative size of these shapes. We've got a very large shape down here. Let me put a shape down here. We've got a mid-sized shape, a medium-sized shape, and a small shape. It seems so simple, right? Large, medium, and small. He could have just as easily composed it in a way where, let's see, where he started the curtain like right here in the middle. And he could have put the division of the curtain and the background scenery right here in the middle vertically. And basically kind of created a 1/2 of the rectangle and 2 1/4 of the rectangle, right? He could have just as easily done that, but he didn't. He did large, medium, and small. So, and I'm not talking this in terms of like a foreground, midground, and background as much as I'm just noticing that very simply he has variety in the negative space. He's dividing the overall rectangle at that foundational level, that background level, into an already interesting composition. We've got variety there: big, medium, small. So when you're setting up your composition, think about that foundation, that negative space, the thing that you're putting your primary subject matter on top of, whether that be narrative or abstract. This is a very simple division of the rectangle of the composition. But there's already visual, that's already an interesting combination of shapes, an interesting way to divide up that space, as opposed to dividing it as we usually do by default into evenly divided up spaces, right? Very, very interesting foundation that he's already established in the negative space before we even start talking about the primary subject matter. All right. So I'm going to, okay. So a couple more things that I wanted to point out about this image. There is, and this isn't the case with all of Degas' image, but in this one in particular, there is a very wonderful simplicity about it. There's a lot of kind of aggressive, textured, and chaotic mark making, but really the elements of this composition, the ingredients that make up the whole of this composition are fairly simple. We've got this kind of curtain shape, background shape floor that we just talked about, and then we have one dancer in the foreground, a dude standing behind the curtain, and then maybe this other dancer whose face we see, but doesn't look like she's, I don't know, something about it doesn't communicate to me that she is very important. The kind of dynamic here, perhaps psychologically, is between this guy who's looking at this dancer right there. Right, so there's kind of interesting gaze happening from behind the curtain. Okay, so besides this kind of narrative that's happening, what's interesting here, and just a really good lesson to learn, is the way he has positioned his primary focal point, his primary subject matter, this dancer, in a relatively unconcentrated area of the composition, right? He's given her space. So we've got a lot of aggressive texture up here at the top with the curtain. We've got a lot of aggressive texture here in the background. I don't know if that's a set or outside or whatever it might be, but a lot of chaos there. And then the floor here, we're looking down, is relatively untextured. It's very soft and it's open. There's not a whole lot of modulation of color. There's not a whole lot of other divisions. He's given her space. So we can use concentration to help guide our viewers' attention. Areas of high concentration are going to be kind of chaotic, and then opening up into a much more open area, and then using that as a framing device for our primary focal point or subject matter can be a very effective way to just get us there, get us to the focal point. So using differences or contrast in concentration, areas of high concentration versus areas of low concentration. Also, notice that, excuse me, so his primary subject occupies a much larger portion of the composition than these secondary focal points or secondary subject matter, right? His primary subject occupies more space. That's going to communicate importance, or communicate a level of intention there, that he wants us to be paying attention to this part of the image. So these are very simple lessons, but I think oftentimes so simple that perhaps we overlook them, right? Our primary subject matter, there are a lot of different ways that we can communicate the importance of that subject to a viewer. These are a couple of the very simple ways. Create space for that person. And by contrast, create chaos in the other parts of the image that kind of force us to the simplicity of this part. And there are ways that high concentration can be used itself to create a visual focal point. Areas of high concentration tend to grab our attention more than areas of low concentration. But in this case, he's using that contrast of concentration to open up this kind of emotional space, or visual space. I say emotional because it's a very emotional painting. But there's this kind of busyness and density and chaos that's happening here that, in contrast, makes this feel so lovely and light and ethereal. Like there's just kind of a glow about it. I also think in this one in particular, it's interesting that he has put so much visual weight up at the top with all these dark values, high contrast, heavy colors, really aggressive texture. And then comparatively down at the bottom, there's not very much dark value. There's not very much contrast or visual weight. So it kind of feels like it's a little top heavy, but perhaps that's intentional and makes the dancer feel more like she's floating, or the overall image feel like it's more, I don't know, like levitating above the ground. Anyway, kind of an interesting way that he's using just this complex visual information, even though we don't necessarily know exactly what it is. The kind of movement and the energy in that this brushwork up here really makes for a nice contrast next to these much softer types of application of paint. All right, so I'm going to skip over to this one. So there are a couple things that I wanted to just point out here. Again, he's using contrast of concentration, and not concentration meaning I'm thinking really hard. Concentration, how much visual information is close together versus further apart. We have this grouping of people on this side of the painting that are all kind of stacked on top of each other. They're overlapping in space. And then comparatively, much fewer people over here on this side of the painting. Not only much fewer people, but much fewer other visual elements. Like there's a chair here, there's a stand here. This instructor is holding some kind of stick. There's a picture frame here in the background. There's architectural elements that feel a little bit more restrictive. There's just a lot more going on over here, and comparatively over here, we've got a whole lot of space that helps frame and give breadth to our primary subject over here on this side, right? It isolates our primary subject matter in a way that helps us understand that this is what's significant about this image. Also, again, comparatively, this dancer, occupies more space of the overall rectangle than these other shapes. So these other dancers that are further away, they're smaller. But she even appears, perhaps also because she's closer to us, to be bigger than this man over here, the instructor. And then this shape right here, the way the dancer is kind of bending over, perhaps makes her feel a little bit smaller. So size variation, the more of the pictorial space that your subject occupies, the more importance it's going to feel like it has, right? The more we're going to communicate to our viewer that this is what is of primary importance. This is what I want you to be paying attention to. Contrast of concentration, isolating our primary subject matter, giving her room to breathe. I think this is another example. Reason I pulled this image out in particular is just very similar to this one. He's got a lot of visual weight in terms of these shiny decorative architectural elements up here at the top, and also value. There's a lot of dark value up here at the top and with these vertical pillars, and then down at the bottom on the floor and in the dresses, comparatively much lighter values. And typically that's reversed. Typically we want the darker values at the bottom of the image to make it feel like it's more grounded, like it ties in more with our sense of balance and gravity, to have a heavier weight on the bottom of the image. But in this case, it's reversed. He's got a lot more heavy visual information up at the top. And I think, again, it's meant to kind of communicate this lightness on the feet of the dancers and lightness of the overall scene. And maybe lightness, I'm thinking not in terms of light and dark, but lightness in terms of weight. Like it feels like they're floating a little bit because of that, the light values at the bottom of the image. All right, so those are a few of the things I wanted to point out just in terms of how he's making a very clear visual statement. He's making it very clear where we're supposed to be looking, what's of primary importance, and then communicating some other narrative elements with these groupings, with angles of like points of view, like the direction all of these people, other people in the scene are looking. So there's a psychological element, how all of these people are looking in this direction, kind of reinforcing our attention, like they're telling us that we're looking here, so you ought to look here too, right? There's that kind of psychology that's just associated with seeing people staring at something and reinforced across the room. That helps also just drive our attention right here to this person. All right. Maybe I ought to say, I don't know, in terms of the foundation that I was talking about over here, perhaps something could be said about these general architectural divisions of space, how we've got kind of a large shape, a medium shape, and a smaller shape, right? There's definitely an asymmetry there that's very interesting. He's also using the architectural, these kind of linear perspective lines of the architecture in a way that creates more movement. They kind of converge over here on the left side of the composition. So if we had these converging lines go down to a vanishing point, they kind of bring our attention to this side of the image. He could have just as easily painted from a vantage point where his eyes were parallel to the back wall, in which case we wouldn't have had these diagonals in the architectural elements. But having those diagonals creates more movement, more energy, and in this case, the way he's positioned this corner off to the left reinforces the asymmetry of the composition, which is there's more movement there's around the image, and it gets us kind of off the center axis. All right, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in terms of these kind of basic ideas of composition, how we're organizing our subject matter within a composition and communicating priority or communicating importance of the various elements in our composition. These ideas apply just as much to abstraction as they do to representation here. I could see this general organization of shapes and colors being not people, but just shapes and colors. And it would have the same kind of effect in terms of guiding us through the image and creating a visual interest and communicating focal point. All right, so the next thing that I want to do, actually, before I get to that, I'm going to pop over to and you guys are looking right at this page. So I'm going to look at here, and cool. All right. Thanks for joining, y'all. It looks like we've got 8 of you here. Fantastic to have you. And I'm not seeing any questions. I've got to figure out a way where I'm showing you my screen, but not necessarily pulling up the Facebook page. Okay, cool. So the last thing that I wanted to get into here is a little bit, I hope you'll indulge me a little bit and go through a process with me that might be a little bit more tedious. So I wanted to get into the geometry that Degas is invoking. Geometry meaning the shapes, the divisions of the rectangle of the picture plane that he's invoking by positioning these different elements in a certain way. He's tapping into some very strong, like visually powerful geometry. And I think that's worth taking a look at. So what do I mean by that? First, let me grab the line tool here. And I'm just going to put a cross here, connecting the corners, so diagonals that go from corner to corner, and then put a horizontal line here right in the middle horizontally, and then a horizontal or vertical line right here dividing up the image vertically, right? So we've got our center point right here in the middle of the image, and then we've divided up the composition both horizontally and vertically in half. So look at how the hand of the dancer comes almost into contact, if not into contact, with the center of the image. Now, a lot of time in my classes, I go on at length about not putting your primary focal point or not putting your primary subject matter right in the center of the image. But I think what Degas does so masterfully is he doesn't put it. You notice he put her off to the side. That's the most of her mass and kind of the core of her body and the gesture of her body. They're sitting off the center line, but he is ever aware of this center point, and he knows that it's a powerful area of the composition. Our eye is going to gravitate there, and he uses that. He kind of pushes against that center of the image in very interesting ways. So she's kind of reaching out and touching. Look at that gesture from one arm to the other, swooping through here and touching that center point right there in the middle, right? He's kind of engaging with that very strong area of the composition right in the center. He does the same thing over here in perhaps a more subtle way. And let me do the same thing here by drawing an X across from corner to corner. You can also see how he's kind of tapping into some of those diagonals. And then So look at how he's engaging that nexus, that point where the horizontal and vertical axes meet right there in the center point. He's got this foot in the background that points right there, almost touches it. He's got the leg of this chair and the side of this one of these columns, a very strong vertical element in the composition that align and reinforce that center point. He's got this bar that comes very close to the center point there and perhaps reinforces that. And then the line of shoulders, which communicates to us that his eye level, he's probably sitting down on a chair because his eye level is at the shoulders here. And actually his eye level is right at the ballet dancer and at this guy's shoulder. So his eye level, she's probably a fairly short dancer. This man's a little bit taller than her. Anyway, these things are also giving us hints as to his relationship as the viewer of this scene. Anyway, I digress. So these different elements and the way he's positioned them is reinforcing that center point, although he is not putting any of his primary subject matter on that center point. He's playing with that as kind of a point of power in the overall composition. And it's a point of power just by virtue of the shape of the picture plane, the rectangular shape of the picture plane. So he's very aware of that as a point of tension. There's something to push against or use. So I don't often point that out, that you can use that center point instead of putting your primary focal point on there or primary subject matter on there. You can use that as a point of tension to play with or to kind of counterbalance against. All right, so that is kind of how he's using that center point. What I wanted to show you here next, and again, I appreciate you hanging with me, and I know this is not okay. Well, let me just go on here. All right, I'm going to change the color so you can see what I'm doing. But next, what I wanted to show you is how he uses squares in his composition. He uses squares, again, very strong geometric division of space, and he uses them masterfully. So what I'm going to do is create a square here in blue so you can see what I'm doing. Look at how her dress, the bottom of her dress, right here, comes into contact almost exactly with the bottom edge of that square. Now I'm going to divide that square up. I'm going to draw lines from corner to corner. And notice how, let me go back to the thing. Notice how, I'm going to zoom in on here, how that line just passes right by her cheek and also picks up the energy of this line, this gesture line that's happening with her head and her neck, right? So even though he's not putting her directly on that geometry, he's kind of engaging with that square right there. He's picking up, he's placing major parts of his subject matter in line with those areas that evoke or tap into that division of space, that square division of space. All right, so, and also if I draw a line, actually I'm not going to do it that way, right across here in the middle. And now what I'm going to do is draw a line from one corner to this other corner of the half of the square. I'm not saying that very well, but hopefully you'll see, actually, what if I do this? I'm going to make that a little bit of a lighter blue so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm taking that half of the square, and I'm going from corner to corner on that half. And again, notice how things start to line up. That this woman's face and this man's face lining up right with that geometry. Notice how there's this little clump right here whose direction kind of aligns with that. Notice, let's see, I saw something else there. We see this kind of outcropping of the curtain also follows along with that division right there. Again, reinforcing this geometry of the square. And then I'm going to do that also down here on the bottom half of the square. So these kinds of grids and dividing things up are something that I picked up along the way from one of my professors in undergrad. And it's just another way to kind of try to pick things apart and understand what's going on. So now notice how the bottom of her arm picks up this line that of the half of the square, and we've got some other aligning happening too. This shadow on the ground, kind of hitting that person right there. And then finally, I'm just going to do, actually, before I do that. All right, so what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to duplicate that layer. Let's see, duplicate layer. Hit OK, and I'm going to change the color. Oh, I put both of those on the same layer. Okay, actually, I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is change the color again to a green. And hopefully this doesn't get too complicated. All right, so what I'm going to do here is edit, stroke. So I have now, instead of a square coming from the top edge down, I have a square using the bottom edge and then going up that dimension and making a square in the reverse direction. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to cut that square in half diagonals. And then I'm going to divide it in half vertically and horizontally, which should coincide with the center of the composition. And then along these halves. Okay. So we can start to see some interesting alignment things happening here too. With this top line hitting the shoulders, the elbow, the top of this dress, it mimics almost exactly, let me turn that on and off, the bottom edge of this curtain area in the background, right? And then one last thing that I'm going to show you here. Hopefully I have not lost your attention completely, but look at this. Look at this. So if I draw a square within that square from the midpoint of that side down here, look at how that mimics almost exactly this little light corner down here. So we've got that square. I'm going to draw this up to that edge, up here to this edge. So we've kind of got a diamond shape within that square. And just because it is so chaotic right now, I'm going to take all of those lines out just so you can kind of see what I'm trying to point out here. Whoops. Let me create a new layer. What I'm trying to point out here is this kind of square shape or diamond shape that happens within that other square, right? So the way he's, and look right here along that edge, there's this little, I don't know if you can see it, there's this little light line that happens right there that also lines up with this diamond shape within that square. Anyway, so this might feel like a stretch to you, and perhaps it is a bit of a stretch. And do I think that he's necessarily intentionally, painting along this grid? I actually do think he's, and we know that he did actually have grids drawn on his preparatory sketches and even on his canvases at times. So I do think he was very aware of how he was using those geometries those underlying geometries. Maybe not explicitly by putting things right along those lines, but by evoking those geometries, by evoking them, by reinforcing diagonals of those geometries and also the shapes of those geometries. You see this a lot in Degas in terms of he uses a lot of squares. Other artists tend to gravitate towards other kinds of divisions. Some go to fourths, some go to thirds, and there are plenty. This is a very deep subject, very well documented subject of different kinds of geometries that artists have used over the years. There's the sacred geometry of the golden mean and the golden rectangle, and how that's been used as a compositional element. But there are also like root 2, root 3, root 4 rectangles. I don't know if you're familiar with any of that, but there's a lot of really interesting ways that people have used these geometric divisions of the rectangle of our picture as a compositional tool to align the elements of their composition along those very strong geometries, because that is compelling to human beings. We respond to those kinds of geometries. All right, so let's see how many have I lost over here? I still have you. Still have 8 of you or so. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. I think it's worthwhile, so I hope you'll stick with me. Indulge me a little bit in this, in looking at some of these divisions of space. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on this image. I'm going to divide it in half, vertically and horizontally. We've already talked about how this chair leg and this column right there invoke those midlines, the center and vertical and horizontal axes, aligning with the tops of these shoulders, with her eye level, with the bar in the background. There's a lot of different ways that those geometries are reinforced. And then let's take a look at, let me put it on a separate layer here. Squares. Okay, and I'm going to change the color so we can see what's going on. Let's put it in blue. Stroke. All right, so there is a blue square, and you can see how this blue square catches the side of her face kind of right in between those two people. So do I think that Degas perhaps had this division on his preparatory drawings and was aware that he was aligning up this dancer's, the side of her face, and this dancer kind of in symmetry across that line? I do. I think he was aware of maybe not letting the geometry like totally dictate the subject matter, but being aware of those divisions and just aligning things up to reinforce those geometries. I absolutely think he was aware of doing that. Some of the alignments might be coincidental, and some of them might be consistent with other geometries, aligning with other geometries, but I do think he was aware of this stuff. Okay, so we got the square there. I'm going to divide that square again into halves across the diagonal. Notice how all that diagonal hits this dancer right there in the back, right in the middle of her form. If I were to do a vertical line dividing that square right there, look at how it goes right down through her head, center mass, and hits her ankle right there. Might be coincidence. It might be. I don't think so. There's so many of these that align with and reinforce these squares that it's hard to imagine that it was entirely coincidental. All right, so now what am I going to do? I've got those diagonals. I've got the horizontal midpoint kind of coming through with the red line. Let me draw some of those. If I cut this square in half and draw diagonals across that way, let's see if we have any alignment. And we have a little bit of alignment maybe with this keystone up here, and the kind of intersection of these geometries right there. Oh my goodness. A bunch of alarms are going off outside. Apologize for that. And then we've got this on the chair. This diagonal is kind of hitting that corner. I'm not seeing a whole lot of significant alignments there, but there are some that perhaps are suggested. With these diagonals, I do start to get a little bit more of alignment with the center point of this, the top of the chair, the seat of the chair, and then how this line goes right through her elbow and waist. I see on this line, oh no, that's the midline. See how that also catches the bottom of her foot right there and her leg right there, that gesture is picking that up. Anyway, quite a bit of alignment happening over here. I'm going to cut that out real quick. And then what I'm going to do, let's see if it works this time. If I've set things up correctly, I'm going to duplicate that layer, change the color. So let's see, let's turn it green. And then I'm going to move it if I can. Didn't want to stay the green for me. Let me change that back to green so you can see. All right, so there's a lot of chaos going on here, but let me turn off these other areas so we can see just that green square. All right, so now we've got quite a bit of alignment. Look at the edge of this square right here. It's picking up that corner right there that we talked about earlier, the corner of that architecture. We've got a pretty high contrast between the shadow on this wall and then the highlight on that wall. The intersecting lines right there hit this dancer right here. Remember how the other square hit this dancer right here in her back. We'll look at now, oh, that's not her back, but that's kind of her waist area, how it's hitting that dancer. And kind of this line lines up with her center core and gesture right there. And then we've got this elbow kind of pretty close there too. And this line's coming through that dancer in the back. Her arm gesture is happening right along that line. Look at this line right here that's hitting the bottom, kind of that dress, the bottom of these shadows that are being cast. There's that, a lot of alignment right there. And right along this guy's elbow, there's alignment there. Let me pick up that green. And let's do a little bit more here where we're dividing those halves of the square into half. And let's look for a little bit more alignment. Look at how her foot hits that center point of that half right there. Look at how his hand reinforces that diagonal, hits the side of her head. Anyway, I can kind of geek out about this stuff. So let me turn all of those back on. Look at that mess. And I could go through with another color and just show you all these little points where the subject matter in the image align with or reinforce those geometries. So a lot of artists will just compose an image by intuition, right? Without, do you need to have this really complicated grid of lines as a tool to help you position things? No. Can you go by intuition? Absolutely. One reason you might want to be aware of this as a tool is because if we always go by intuition, we tend to repeat the same thing over and over. And this is where I will tell briefly a story I've told many times in my class. In my graduate thesis show, I made, I believe it was 6 or 8 paintings, I can't remember. But I made these 8 paintings or 6 paintings, each completely different subject matter, and I put them up on the wall. And when I saw them at my graduate thesis show, all together up on the wall, I realized that it was the exact same painting repeated 6 times. So I had changed the subject matter, but how I was aligning the different shapes, the different elements of my composition, the way I was positioning, the way I was dividing up space was exactly the same. So these tools, are they necessary? No, but they can be helpful in pushing us beyond our default behaviors, giving us a framework or kind of a mental model to understand how we might be able to recognize when we're doing the same thing over and over again, and how we might grow and grow our awareness of how our images are functioning. I think this stuff is really, really compelling. And I think that is what Degas was doing. I think he was just interested in studying how things work and how we can use those things to be more aware of how his own paintings were working, and maybe push himself into trying new things that could expand his vocabulary, and refine his ability to control and manipulate attention, which is kind of what we're all about and what we're doing. All right, so you guys have stuck it out. Looks like I still have a few. I still have a few of you here with me. Thanks for hanging in there. Um, Again, this broadcast, this critique, is meant for alive people. For I'd love to see work that you are working on now, works in progress, or work that you've recently finished. I'd love you to send those in, take a look at them, and talk about them. My hope is not only to help you see what's going on in your artwork, and give you some suggestions on how you might strengthen or improve, or deal with problems if you're having any. But also, my hope is that we will all kind of get inspiration from seeing what each other are doing now. Not what we did 2 years ago, but I think there's an energy in being aware of people out there in the world working on artwork, dealing with the same problems that we're working on. And I think there's a lot of energy and momentum and inspiration that can come from that. So I hope you will be willing to. I know it can be a little bit daunting to put your image on the wall in front of other people and have it critiqued. I I'm not a mean critic. I'm not a mean critic. I do try to keep my comments to what I think will really be helpful to you in improving your image or improving your understanding. So I hope you will share. I hope you'll be willing to take a step into the uncomfortable and send me images of your work, so that we can all learn and benefit from what you're doing, and also just be inspired by what you're doing, and that you are doing stuff. So with that, I will say, um, I think that's it. Um, yeah, that's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Dablon at gmail.com. You can send comments or leave comments here on the Facebook feed. Share with whomever you think might be interested in it. If you want to submit images for this critique, you need to be on my email list. To get on my email list, you can go to dabbleon.com, dabbleon.com, and there are places there where you can click and submit your email address so that you can get my weekly emails asking for submissions and reminding you that this is going on. And with that, I will be done for this week. I hope you all have a fantastic week, and